Philadelphia is steep in broadcast history. From the early pioneering days of broadcasting in the 1920s to today, Philadelphia has always been at the forefront. The Delaware Valley has been home to some of the best local programming in the country, starting with the early soap operas and children's shows to pioneering the best news formats in the country. Much of it all began right here. From radio announcers to television personalities, cameramen to directors, these were the broadcasters that burned up the airwaves. These were the pioneers of Philadelphia broadcasting.
Hello, I'm Marcia Rose, and welcome to Pioneers of Philadelphia Broadcasting. I'm here with Al Primo, and we're going to be talking about the old days in Philadelphia. But first, in the interest of full disclosure, I ought to tell you that I've known Al for 50 years.
At least 50 years.
How did that happen? And I was his first female anchor. And so in point of fact, Al was my boss. And it's kind of an interesting thing to have role reversal and for me now to have a chance to ask you the questions.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be inducted into the Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame.
It's a big honor, and we're delighted. We're just announcing it, so that's terrific, Al.
Well, I think it's a great honor for me and a great honor for my wife.
Rosina is here.
She was with me, and she was the long-suffering, while I was in the battlefield trying to make these ratings and this eyewitness news concept fly, she was taking care of the home front, and for that I'm forever grateful.
Listen, anybody who was involved with you for a long time was long-suffering, Al. We know that. But, you know, there are lots of things that I want to talk to you about, and you've had a very storied and legendary career. But the thing that you are most known for happened right here in Philadelphia. And you really revolutionized television broadcasting, television news broadcasting for all time when you invented the concept of eyewitness news. Take me through that.
Well, I came here as a new news director, you know, a 20-something kid.
We were all kids, weren't we?
We were all kids. I was working for Westinghouse and had some wonderful training from them, and one of the first things you do when you go into management is you look at all the union contracts and what the rules and regulations are of the field. And in examining the AFTRA contract, I saw a clause in there that said, you may use any member of AFTRA to write, report, and appear on the air with their story without paying any additional compensation.
That was the important line, no additional compensation.
The big secret of television, and the real reason why there weren't reporters on television, was it was a very costly proposition before this particular clause. So that's why there weren't reporters on the air.
So at that point, you had an anchor person, you had your staff of reporters, they went out and did the stories and then wrote them for the anchor person. So the only person doing the news was the anchor person.
Yeah, it was the anchor man, the weatherman, and the sportsman,
right,
which is what all of television was about. With this freedom to use reporters, I brought all the reporters into the office and interviewed them individually and found out their area of interest and really created television's first beat system. You know, somebody was a medical reporter, transportation, right, politics, and so on. And I sent them out to cover their beats, and within weeks, really, they were bringing back original stories, not earth-shattering stories, but stories ahead of the newspapers, and it began the important content expansion of the news for television.
Well, but you changed it for all times. Instead of just one great figure, in our case, it was Vince Leonard, right, doing the news. You had all of these people going out, doing the stories, and instead of just writing an intro, instead of just writing a story for him to do, they wrote an intro for him to read, and then he threw it to them, and they were, in fact, eyewitness news.
Exactly. Well, Vince is a tremendous anchor person and was doing a fabulous job with, you know, a good rating performance, etc. And there was some question in his mind, and really everyone's mind, why would we have to make this dramatic change when it never occurred before? And that was a very difficult battle to fight. And I have Fred Walker and Win Baker, the two management people, who said, you know, do what you have to do down there. And to Vince, I said, look, this is going to give you an opportunity to expand, not just reading the news, but debriefing these reporters and asking them some important questions, and it will give the audience a new look at you, and it worked.
And he felt it. Well, it was very exciting. You know, it was a sea change, and it's a sea change that has affected television news all over the country.
Well, I always tell the story that Philadelphia, as you know, is the great tryout city for Broadway shows and so forth. You can do almost anything you want in Philadelphia and nobody notices.
Or didn't.
Nobody really noticed Eyewitness News and the sea change that was going on, except one man in New York who was a general manager of WABC. And he came down and looked at what we were doing and invited me to come to Channel 7 in New York.
Yeah, that's when you abandoned us.
Well, it was very hard to resist that because this was a station that was really in terrible shape. And we were able to put the Eyewitness News format there and bring in reporters who had more experience and so forth. And we really did the same exact thing that we did in Philadelphia in New York. As you remember, you were the first female anchor that I had the courage to put on the air.
I have to ask you about that.
And it was something that came to me. You know, it wasn't, let's do this and break the rules. It was, you know, you were there, you were competent, you had a great deal of experience in the Philadelphia market, and it seemed like the natural thing to do. And of course, Tom Snyder, who had come with the station from Philadelphia, was there. And this was an opportunity to create the first man-woman anchor team and give him an anchor chance and you an anchor chance. And it worked out beautifully.
We had a great ride, but of course, what happened was because nobody noticed you're doing it here in Philadelphia, ABC took credit for a long time, with you, of course, giving you credit, for inventing Eyewitness News, and we all knew that it was us.
Right.
And
well, I think this award, and you know, I've written a book called Eyewitness Newsman, which tries to document this, and of course, KYW Philadelphia is the birthplace of the format that changed broadcast journalism forever.
All right, so here you are. You spent a large part of your career in Pittsburgh initially,
Yes.
right? Then you went to Cleveland as kind of a way station before they were going to come to Philadelphia and do the swap of Philadelphia and Cleveland. And you were there for maybe 6 months or so. So what? Now they're telling you you're coming to Philadelphia. What did you think about Philadelphia? What did you think about this new market?
Well, it was a huge step up from Pittsburgh and Cleveland. I am thankful to the Lord about the 12 years I spent at KDKA doing every job there was, because it gave me the great depth of experience to do the things that were able to come together when this opportunity presented itself in Philadelphia.
But what did you hear about Philadelphia? I mean, were you apprehensive about Philadelphia? Were you excited about it? And when you got here, what did you think about it?
Well, it was, you know, this was the big time. You know, this was the big station for Westinghouse. Everybody who came to this station from Westinghouse was at the top of their career, except for me, because I was in Philadelphia.
And you were
I
a
was
kid.
in Pittsburgh, and I was a kid, but I knew Pennsylvania, and I knew the state. And it was, you know, awesome to come here. And then I was very, very impressed with the way NBC
yes, we should say that it was KYW was then WRCV,
yeah,
and it was an NBC station for years, owned and operated.
And I was very, very impressed with the fact that the reporters and the people in the newsroom were very well trained and very good. You just didn't see them. No one had a chance to do it. And with Eyewitness News, we brought that forward, and that combination really captured the imagination of Philadelphia.
I mean, you knew Tom, and Tom was in Cleveland, and he
Yes.
came with you from Cleveland. I remember when the first day Tom burst into my office and said, "Here, we're going to do the news together." I was intimidated. What did you think about? Were you nervous about putting the two of us together, about having a woman on the air? What?
One of the things when you're in your 20s that you don't really worry about is the fear does not exist. You know, I had a plan, I had an idea, and I was going to execute it. I was never afraid for a day. I knew exactly what we were going to do, and you just march forward. And thanks to you and Tom and the staff that was here, it was executed beautifully. I mean, I get the credit, but the people who did it really are the ones who deserve the credit, which I try to give as much as I can.
But you know, we did the show for a long time, and we had great ratings, if I must say. So, and then one day you called us into a meeting at the Warwick Hotel, and you said, "Okay, guys, you're doing a great show, a terrific show." We were going like this. We're really proud of ourselves. Now you said, "Don't do it anymore." Do you remember that?
No.
You were worried. The ratings were good, but they weren't the demographic that you wanted. And you said we had lots of men, and I said, "Well, that's wonderful." He said, "That's not what we want. We want women 18 to 34."
Yes.
And you know, we were just crushed, just absolutely crushed. And you were emphatic that we had to change our emphasis. And Tom and I had both insisted right from the start that it was going to be a hard news show, and that it wasn't going to be simpering stories because it was on at noon. And we wrote Vietnam. I mean, it was Vietnam, and it was horror and mayhem and blood,
right.
But not just
the kind of thing you don't want at noon time.
That's right.
In the daytime.
But we did. So I went out and I bought every single magazine there was, and I laid them on the floor, and a pattern jumped out at me, and it was sex, food, law, medicine, children, and that was what we started programming, because we did a 5-minute live interview, which I did in each show.
Right.
And I had said to you, you know, when you told us to change it, Tom and I were adamant, you were wrong, we should do what we were doing. And then we had to come crawling to you and say you were right.
Yeah. Well, you even had a baby for us, as I recall, which we did on television, one of the first.
Yeah, my husband
Katie
loved
has a
that. We had a
baby.
great big ad that said KYW is having a baby.
And, you know, it was the fact that we were expanding, you know, the view of the program and the audience, and it worked even better, and it really, you know, set an important precedent.
When you were doing all that, I mean, the polling wasn't then what it is now, but did you do focus groups, or did you just go with your gut in terms of what would?
I can honestly say that we did all of these things without focus groups, without anything but our gut feelings and the group think of the Westinghouse staff. Right. You know, we had a wonderful art director, Ken Philo.
He was
the
terrific.
Director of your show was Art Fisher, you know, who went on to become the director of Sonny and Cher. You know, and it was just a wonderful staff. But the research aspect of what we were doing came into play when I went to New York, and you know, I was putting my format together and was called into a meeting for the first time to be introduced to our research team. And the first thing out of the guy's mouth was, "This is not going to work. You're taking the emphasis away from the anchor man, and he's not going to be able to relate to the audience."
And you had a tough anchor man.
Yeah, we had you know, his name was Roger Grimsby, and he was very difficult to watch because he was kind of New York gruff.
Very.
And I'll never forget this guy saying all the things that we were going to do were not going to work, and I was.
How'd you feel about that?
That's when fear entered into my life, and you know, I really stood up and did the Primo speech, which was, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to win with this, this is what it's about, and this is how we're going to approach it. And, you know, in 6 months you can come back and tell me that we failed, but I don't think so. So we did do what I was able to do was to bring a co-anchor in with Roger Grimsby, who was this stern, tough guy, and brought in Bill Butel, Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah, very nice.
And that team worked together like,
excuse me,
you know, you can't believe. And then all the reporters.
But what you also did was you changed the ethnicity of a broadcast. Up until then, most of our broadcasts were absolutely pure, white, vanilla,
Exactly.
white bread kinds of programs. Yeah. And you then had Roseanne Scarmadella and Rivera.
Geraldo.
What?
Geraldo Rivera.
Geraldo Rivera.
Melba Tolliver, etc.
And what you did was you went out to get them. It wasn't that they just, you made up your mind that you were going to make that broadcast look like New York.
Well, it comes basically for what we did here in Philadelphia. Remember that Trudy Haynes
Was the first African-American woman on there?
exactly. I got her from Detroit, Michigan.
Right.
I remember it like it was yesterday. We flew her in. She had mostly a radio background, but we flew her to Philadelphia.
She'd done weather, I think, also, hadn't she?
No, she was mostly doing radio news.
Right.
And so we brought her here. We sent her, gave her a big audition, sent her out with some people, and let her be on camera and so forth. And I'll never forget. At the end of a very long day, I said, "Trudy, I'd like to offer you a job." And she said, before I had the word job out, she said, "I accept." And that was really a wonderful, wonderful break, because she was the first African-American woman reporter, and the community took to her and loved her and worked with her, and we made some great breakthroughs with her here into the
And then you also had Claude Lewis.
Claude Lewis is a
he was a brilliant
reporter, an essayist, and we brought him over from the newspaper and gave him a lot of training. He was a lot of uncomfortable with the tools that we work with every day because he was a writer. But working with you and others, he managed to do a really wonderful job and make a great contribution here, and went on to become a nationally recognized.
Yeah, no, he was my good friend, and you could see changes, but the old timers in the newsroom were not very happy with all of these changes, were they?
Well, they weren't, because it was a major change. The saving grace was that each of these reporters now got to become
with stars themselves.
Stars. And someone once said to me, "Al Primo, you made the reporters stars." And that's a great credit that I'd like to have, because
well, you did.
Well, they were able to get, the stories and information directly to the audience as eyewitnesses, rather than writing it, giving it to the anchorman to let him read. They were on the set. The story became more important. Their presence elevated the whole presentation. So that was the thing. Eyewitness News changed broadcast journalism forever. They call it action news. They call it news center.
It's
always eyewitness news.
Well, you made a tremendous change, and working with you was exciting. It was something new all the time, and there are 101 anecdotes that we can't tell on the air, but that were wonderful. And seeing you again and talking to you again about all those old days is really a treat.
Well, it's I'm blessed with having continued to be able to work in this industry. I've created a new program called Teen Kids News, which is eyewitness news with teenagers, which were syndicated to 200 stations across the country, and that's very good exposure, because we started out remembering my old tricks from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. The teenagers that we hired were the children of Kathy Lee, Roseanne,
really?
Paula Zahn, and we
Funny.
got a lot
Next
of press.
generation.
Yeah, we got a lot of press with that, and we were able to kick off the show. But there's nothing like journalism. It's a great high calling, as you know. We worked with some great people. David Brenner, who's passed away, wonderful documentarian. Tom, Vince, he's still going strong, and I feel blessed to have been part of it.
Well, let's turn it around the other way and say that we were blessed. Didn't always seem that way at the time, but we were blessed to have you and to be part of an experiment and to look back on it. And what is incredible to me is that as we sit here talking, that this was 50 years ago, Al. Where did it go to? Amazing. And we wouldn't recognize broadcast journalism at KYW today. It's a very different animal. And so I feel happily blessed to have been there with you at that time. And I thank you for being with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm at the age where I count my friends and my blessings. You're one of my great friends, and the blessings that we all have is that we're working in broadcast journalism and having something to do with enlightening people.
It's a happy way on which to end. Thank you, Al Primo.
My pleasure to be here.
Creator of Eyewitness News.